Well, as you can see, we have the infamous stick drift, and we have it on two controllers here. I bought both of these controllers with the stick drift. I really like to mod controllers, so I tend to go out and see where I can get my best deals for buying lots of broken controllers, etc. And these two controllers I got for 60, 70 bucks, I think, together, which is pretty good considering the fact that one of these controllers cost that same exact amount. So I got them for about half the price of a controller. We're going to go ahead and open these up, and we are going to resolve the stick drift issue. There's a couple ways that we can go about doing that. We can fully replace the analog, which we are going to do. I like doing that because I like using a whole new system altogether. There is also the option of changing the tensioners on the analogs. However, I think it's easier, and I like to just put whole new analogs on there. These controllers look pretty beat up too, but that's alright because we're probably going to change all these anyways. I really just want to use the inside of this controller and maybe this black plate here. Not sure yet. Not sure what I want to do with these ones. I do like I said, I do like to mod these controllers, and that's why I buy them. And I make sure that they are 100% before I do mod them, because nobody likes broken controllers. So the first thing we need to do is obviously pop these off, and I just use this little plastic tool here. You don't want to use anything too hard because it will scratch the plastic and make it look bad. So this one has it on the left stick, and this one has it on the right stick. And it's actually pretty bad. So this left one, when I first plugged it in to test it, didn't look like anything was too wrong with it, until I started pressing a whole bunch of buttons and stuff and clicking on the sticks and moving them around and everything. Then it got really bad, and this drifts up, so it always drifts up even though the stick stays where it is. So we're going to go ahead and swap that out. And this is these buttons right here. So you want to pull down the trigger and just pop those buttons out. Just get behind them, and they just pop forward. If I can get it out here. Yep, just like that. And I believe that this is controller BDM010, and you can always tell before opening the entire controller, you can always tell by the triggers and the way that they're set up. I think 010 has this little triangle hole right there. I believe that this is that one, yes. You just gotta get a screwdriver. I have an assortment of screwdrivers. I like to use a really small Phillips head for this. It seems to work perfectly. And there's a screw right in here that we're trying to take out. So you gotta take that out. And then there's another screw on the other side, same spot, right in here. And we're gonna take that character out too. If we can get it out. There it goes. And the plastic part that we took off, there's two screws underneath each one of those. So there's one right here and one right here. And we're just gonna unscrew those. The nice thing about PS5 controllers is they're pretty easy to work on. I like working on the Xbox Series controllers better, but they're just more fun to work on. However, PS5 controllers, in my opinion, are nicer. and the mods on them look super clean. So now we're just going to take this plastic, we're going to separate these plastic pieces here, and we're going to do that by first using our plastic tool and separating along this edge here, and there's a pop, and it'll separate through here. So we're going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm just going to put that plastic tool in there and follow along. And pop, came off. Alright, now there's two little tabs here. There's a tab right here and a tab right here. You want to pull those out and push down a little bit, and it comes right out. Sometimes you need to separate the front too, depending on how old the controller is. Sometimes they like to stick in there really good. But we're going to pull down on the back and kind of push forwards, and it just pops right out. So it's going to, you have to push these ones forward because you can't just pull down on it because the triggers will be in the way. So that's the inside of the shell here. Here is the battery, and I really like the setup for these triggers and for the bumpers here. It's a separate part that you connect by ribbons to the board. I just think that's a nice setup, especially whenever you're doing the mods, because the mods fit perfectly where these ribbons are. You just take these ones out and put the new ribbons in, depending on what you want to do. I always like to do remap kits. Alright, so we take the battery out, which plugs in right there, and then there's one screw right here. And we just need to take that screw out. And this is also why it's a little easier to take these ones apart, is because once you have that out, you never want to yank either, because I've bought controllers before that have had defects, and a lot of people rip these out here, which is a little microphone, and you don't want that to break. And all it is a little rubber piece in there. We're just going to pop it out. So some of the ribbon right here sits in a little, there's a little hole right there, and that's where the ribbon sits. That holds this into place. So we're just going to pop that out. And once that's out, we can take this plastic piece off here. Be careful not to yank on anything because it will break. Alright, so now that we're on the inside here, you're going to need to remove this ribbon. You can leave this one here, but I always take it out anyways, just because I don't want to break it or anything. So we need to remove this ribbon as well. You just pull up on that. And there is also the two ribbons here that go to the triggers and bumpers. So we need to undo those ones as well. And it's the same thing, you just pull up on it. And you have to hold the board down here because these ribbons are in really tight. So we're just going to pull those out on each side. There you can see we pulled those ribbons out from right there and right there. Now everything is loose. So that's why I like these controllers, is because minimal screws to take out, which is also nice that it has screws instead of like T9 bits and stuff like that, because everyone has screws. Oh, I forgot this, or screwdrivers, I mean. I forgot to take out this ribbon right here. You also have to take that one out. That goes to the touchpad. And this one's usually a pain to get out. Yep. Yeah, this one's always difficult to get out here. You gotta kind of pull up lightly on either side of it and kind of like shimmy it out, because it sits really tight in there, which is a good thing, because then it's less likely to come loose. Alright, so there's two little locking tabs for this board. There's one in here, which you may not be able to see because it's so dark, but there's two black tabs. There's one right behind this where the battery plugs in here, and there's another one on the other side which has already came up. So we're just going to go ahead and push that tab out of the way. Maybe. Okay, let's try there we go. Yep, perfect. Okay, so we didn't even have to push it. It just, if you move the board, it'll move out of the way. So here are the analogs here, and we're going to be replacing the left one. I usually put a piece of tape on it so I don't forget, however the tape does come off. So what I like to do is put the tape in there big enough so that whenever I pull it out, the tape will stick to the frame on which one it is. That's a good way to remember which one you're replacing. Those locking tabs for this board, there's one right here, and there's one right here. And you literally just push those, and then you can lift the board up out of there. So we're going to go ahead and desolder the positive and negative wires on either side of these so that we'll be able to change out this analog stick here. But of course, first we need to take off the analog sticks. And now that we got those off, we can take it out. I always like to test these too. You can never really tell just by feeling them if something's wrong with them. Yeah. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and desolder these. Alright, now that we've got the soldering iron warmed up, we're going to go ahead and remove the positive and negative wires. What always helps too is if to help yourself out a little bit is to take a picture to remember where positive and negative goes on these boards, because whenever you go to install them back on, it's always hard to tell. So I like to use a little bit of flux. I don't use too much, but it just helps speed up the process of getting these off. And I still have some solder on there, so we're just gonna touch it and it pops right off. Boom. And now we can just take that board out, and here we are. I have this really cool tool here that I use to hold smaller boards. It works great for every board that has, or every controller board. It does a great job of holding it. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to put flux on each one of these pins that goes through here, and we'll add some new solder to each one of those. And like I said before, there's multiple ways to do this. Everyone has their own way. I just end up replacing the whole entire analog on its own. So I don't care about saving this analog, because once you heat it up the way that I do it, it will melt the analog stick. So now that we got that on there, we're just going to take our soldering iron and touch it to each one of these pins and put some new solder on there. And again, what this does is it just weakens the solder that's already on there. From the factory, I use a leaded solder, which melts at a lower temperature. You should never breathe this in though, because it is lidded. Usually if I do a lot of soldering, what I'll do is I have a fan back here that helps out, and it sucks the air through and filters it out. Here's the fan here. So as you can see, there's a filter on it, and it just sucks all the smoke through. It helps out a lot. Definitely a useful item if you're soldering a whole bunch of things. Now that we've got the solder on there, which went on really well, we're going to go ahead and heat it up, and we're going to use our heat gun in order to do that. It's always a risky process if you don't know what you're doing using a heat gun like this. You can always put a smaller top on it, because they make extenders for these that have smaller holes. You just pop it on there and you can just heat it up through here. I've been doing this for a long time, so I usually just typically hold it and I can get them off. You just don't want to melt the plastic components that are around on this board here, because you need those for the controller to work. So we're going to go ahead and heat this up. And get yourself some tweezers or pliers or something to hold or to pull the analog off. So as you can see here, all the solder is starting to get shiny, which is good. You want it to get really shiny before you attempt to take it off. Basically what that means is that it's melting, and some of it will actually sink in to the holes, and that's also good, and you want that to happen, because once that sinks in, it's a lot easier to take off the analog stick. So what I do is I just come in here and just wiggle it, and I work upside down, because if you try to work the other way, it doesn't come out as easy. Doing it this way, on some controllers they just fall out, but not all the pins on the analog stick are always straight whenever they put them in. And so if you have the problem of them being crooked when they were put in, then it's not going to be able to pull up very well, and it's not going to be able to fall out very well either. So we got to kind of pull on it, shimmy. It looks like the solder is starting to melt really well. Just gotta heat it up some more. And like I said, if you use a smaller tip, it definitely works out really well. It just doesn't do it as fast, and I'm really impatient, so I found out that this way works best for me. Okay, so we got it loose on that side there. So now that it's loose over there, we're going to try to angle the heat more towards this side, and it comes right out. Boom, just like that. So it looks like it didn't really melt at all. Nope, it didn't melt at all. So that's actually a good removal there. In theory, you could use this again if you change these tensioners on here, which are these two green parts right here and right here. That's what causes the stick drift to happen. However, we're just going to replace the whole thing again, because it doesn't cost much more, if at all, to just change out the whole entire analog. Alright, I added more solder to each one of these holes after I took it off. I realized that the positive and negative wires aren't actually holes that go through the board. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to heat it up from this side down here, which you can see it did melt it a little bit in the middle there. The analog melted it a little bit, but that makes absolutely no difference. So we're just going to heat it up from the bottom here. And as we heat it up, we're going to take our sucker tool here and just suck out each one of those holes. So we're just heating this up here, and we're gonna scoot it over to the edge. And once I see that solder start to soften up, again, it'll get shiny as it heats up, and then it'll kind of cool down. So the sharp points that you see from when I applied the solder, they will fall down a little bit. And once those start to fall down, we can go ahead and suction them out. Yep. So this way works really well. A lot of people will take a soldering wick, which is like a copper wick, and they will desolder each one of these individually. However, with me, I'm really impatient, like I said, and like to get things done quick. Alright, so that is the analog taken out. And as you can see, this little guy right here fell off when we were heating the board up, but that's okay because it literally just sits on there. So, yep, all in all, that's a good removal, as you can see here. And I'll clean this flux up that you see that's right there, but no components lost, no scorching or anything. This is the old analog, and this is the new one. Now these ones are 1-for-1, which means that this is actually a PlayStation 5 controller analog. So these are the ports side by side. The old one, the new one. And what you can do, let's say you buy a whole lot of, and a lot is like, I don't mean like a lot, you know, but it's like actually called a lot. And what it is if you buy, let's say you buy 50 analog replacements all at once, and you know, you have multiple different controllers that you work on, what you can do with these is from the old analog that you take off, you can actually disassemble the analog. And what you do with that is you bend those metal pins that you see laying flat right there, you bend them outwards, and it'll actually open up the frame of the analog. But before you do that, you want to take these tensioners out, and they literally just pop out. You can just pop them out from the bottom there. You just pop them out with some tweezers or something like that. And once you have those tensioners out, you can open up the frame of the analog. And once you do that, this blue piece that's on the bottom here will slide out. And this is a whole separate piece for the clickiness of the analog. This is a separate piece that's loose, but you'll take the inside of this analog out, and you can use the old spring and the old analog stick from your old controller and put it inside of this one and reassemble it, and it will work perfectly fine. If you try to use a PS5 analog on, let's say, a series controller, it won't work. The reason for that is they all have different springs inside of them, and those springs make a huge difference when it comes to moving the analog around and it'll be too sensitive inside of a different controller. So the PS5 analog inside of a series controller will make it jump. So from the middle point to where it's not moving at all and it's just resting, and then if you move it to the left, right, up, or down, even carefully, what'll happen is it'll cause the reading to jump, and it'll make it impossible to use the controller. So we're going to go ahead and throw this on the board there and get her soldered down. Alright, I got you zoomed in here. So with the new analog, we want to line up each of these feet to these holes here. And what tends to happen is when they're shipped, all of the pins will bend and it won't want to go in right the first time. So what you have to do is kind of align it and sit each one of those pins over the holes there. And as you put it in, take something to push the pins into those holes and just keep a light pressure on it the whole time that you're doing this. And it will make the installation a lot easier. So we got that side in, and it looks like one of these pins over here. Yep, we gotta slide that one back a little bit, and it should just push in now. Yep. So as you can see, it's a 1-for-1 replacement. Now we just need to throw some solder on the bottom of it. And the good thing about it is you can bend these pins a little bit once you put this on here. That way it's easier to solder in to the board. It actually holds it when you turn it upside down to throw the new solder on. However, since this is a 1-for-1 replacement, it's going to go ahead and sit in there exactly how you want it. Alright, let's get some solder on there. So we're going to go ahead and feed the solder as we hold the iron on it. Each one of these pins. And it'll sit perfectly on there. Alright, and we got all those soldered on. And it's sitting perfectly on the board there. If it's not sitting perfectly, you always want to check underneath. And if it melts on the board when you are taking the old analog off, what you can do is just take like a razor blade and lightly scratch the plastic off. Because it will cause the new analog to sit sideways or sit wonky on there. You want the surface to be as flat as possible. That's the only downside, but again, it only takes 10 seconds to scrape that plastic off of there. So now that we got to put it on, we're going to go ahead and solder the red and black wires back on to this board and put the controller together temporarily to test it and make sure that there's no drift. There's a new solder on each one of those pins there. It's sitting perfectly on the board. And we're going to solder positive and negative back on there and test this out. Just like on the removal, we're going to put them back the same exact way that they came off. And like I said, if you don't remember which way they came on, for one, there's tons of pictures online of these controllers. It is always helpful to take your own pictures when doing it. But basically, if you're looking at it from the angle that I'm looking at it from, the black is going to go furthest to the front, and the red is going to go furthest to the back. And it's that easy. Alright, we're gonna get this thing temporarily put together and go test it out. Make sure we have no drift. Alright, so same way as the uninstall, we're gonna install it back together. So we're gonna go ahead and pop the analogs on there. And they will click into place. You always want to make sure that it clicks into place, because it will act wonky if you don't. And you want to move those ribbons out of the way. You want to make sure that none of the ribbons get caught underneath the board when you put it back in. And you want to especially be careful down here that this ribbon doesn't get caught under there. So this one came out a little bit, so we're just going to go ahead and pop it back into place. And again, it's got a little hole here for the ribbon to go in on this side, which isn't actually the ribbon, it's just a piece that has no connections on it. You just gotta feed that ribbon back up through. If I can get it here, yep. And now that that ribbon is up there, that's good. And you always want to make sure this ribbon on the front here is also fed through properly. And once you have those, we're going to go ahead and put some pressure on the board. That way we can pull that ribbon up. This ribbon is really short. They should have made it just a little bit longer. It would have made it easier to work with. However, it's fine the way it is. So now we're just going to push and it'll click right into place there. Now we just need to put all the ribbons back in, same way that we took them out. And they just pop in there. Same with the trigger and bumper ribbons. They just pop right in. Well, these ones are a little tougher to get in. That one's the hardest to get in and out. And we'll get this last ribbon in. Maybe. We're just going to kind of jimmy it. Same way we took it out, we just jimmy it back in. So now we got all the ribbons connected there. We can add the microphone ribbon back as well. And that just slides in there like so. And we're going to put this plastic piece back on here so that we can secure the board down and put the battery on. I'm just going to move that microphone ribbon out of the way here. Slide this in, and you want to get these black and red wires underneath. There is little legs on this plastic piece, and you want to get those underneath those legs so that they're out of the way. And it just sits in there nice and easy, just like this. Now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and screw it down to secure it. Maybe if we don't lose the screw first. I've lost all my screws. Alright, now that that's secured in there, we can go ahead. Oh, I forgot to, oops. Well, I forgot to install something, but that's okay. We don't need it at this second to test the analogs. We're going to go ahead and test those analogs, and then we will put that sensor back in. Alright, and you just put the battery in. I don't think you even need the battery necessarily, but we're going to go ahead and test this out, make sure there's no drift on it. Alright, so I like to go online and use the gamepad tester, and you just plug it up to your controller here. You just press a button for it to activate, and it will pull up this screen here, and these are your analogs. So this is where you can test them to make sure that everything is good. So it looks like everything is good. That right one seems to be moving a little bit, but you gotta make sure it's good. Alright, it looks good. Cool. We'll get the controller put back together and test it out for real. Alright, so the sensor that I forgot was that rectangular piece that fell off earlier. I just went ahead and slid that back in. So what we're going to do now is put the controller back together. And all we need to do is put this plate on here first. And just kind of slide it in the top here, like so. You gotta kind of wiggle it there. And now that that's in there, we're going to go ahead and put pressure on it, on the back a little bit. And it should pop in nicely on these two clips. Just like that. And it's good to be screwed together here as soon as we pop those in. Now we're going to screw these screws back in. If I can get them. Screw back in. Oh, this tip isn't magnetic, I forgot. That's the only downfall of this super small screwdriver. So I have another one that's just a little bit bigger and it works perfectly fine. But I grabbed this one, so we're going to go ahead and use this one. So we're going to put the screws back in there and there. And then you have the two screws, one right here and one right here. Bear with me here as I put these screws back in. Ugh. Okay, I'm going to need to use the tweezers for this. My fingers are too big for these little controllers. Alright, and once you have those screws in, these bumpers just go back into place. The right one goes on the right one, and it just presses in there, like so. Same with the left, they just press back in. And the last piece we need to put on is the faceplate here, which isn't necessary, but we'll go ahead and put it on for the video's sake. Just to show you. So you want to put those two top pins in. Once those are in, you push it forward a little bit and it'll sit down. And then from there you just kind of feed it together. Push down on all the areas, make sure that it's in there nice and snug. And we'll go test it out on the PS5 and see what we can get there. Looks like the right one does have a little bit of drift in it, which I'm hoping I didn't get these two confused with each other, because that would suck, definitely. But we're gonna test it out and see what we can figure out from there. Alright, so we definitely have drift on the right one on here. However, the left one is perfectly fine. So that right one will need to be fixed. As you can see, it's trailing upwards. The best way to test these controllers out is, for one, the gamepad tester, and then second of all is to plug it into the game as well. But the left analog stick is good. I may have replaced the wrong analog. However, now you know how to fix it, and so I will go through and fix the right analog here, because it's really touchy. It's actually unbearable to play with here. Yeah, it's super touchy. Oh yeah. Yep, so we'll have to change that up. But that left stick is working perfectly here. Alright. Well, now you've seen how to replace an analog on a PS5 controller here. I'm going to go ahead and switch out the right one. And once this controller's all set and good to go, I'll probably mod this. So, thanks for watching.